What's going on, guys? Matt back with another video. Don't mind me while I park my vehicle. Back here in the Zen Den. A little different than my usual setup. If you haven't seen some of my other videos where I go into the Zen Den, this is not going to be a stock video. So I apologize if you're clicking for stock information. Today we're going to go over books that I recommend and books that I'm looking at reading in this new 2021 year upcoming. And also I want to extend a question out to you guys where I am always open to looking for recommendations on books to read. I love reading. I am borderline obsessed with reading, and I read as much as I possibly can when I can. And if you guys have any recommendations out there in any of the categories that I'm going to be covering on this video, then by all means, please, I would love nothing more than to have conversations with you guys in the comments on different books that you've read and any of your opinions on the books that I'm going to be talking about in this video. So with that, let's jump into it, guys. So I have about, I've got a list over here that you can't see, it's off screen, but it's a list of 6 different categories of books that I try to maintain these 6 categories as my own personal most important categories that act as a rotation for me to read books. I used to read books only in like finance and self-help, self-improvement, and I of course got bored and needed other types of books to read. So over time, over years, I've actually developed these different 6 categories that I particularly enjoy. And so I want to go into these 6 categories and see if you guys have any interest in these things that I've been reading. So my 6 categories are actually finance, real estate, entrepreneurialism, self-improvement, social, and fiction. So I want to jump into these different categories, what I'm reading now, what I've read in the past that I recommend for anybody out there who finds himself on a similar path as myself, and let's just get right into it. So first and foremost, fiction. I know, the most important, right? I want to get into fiction first because I want to keep the beginning of this video a little more lighthearted because some of the other items I'm going to cover are a little more boring. But so fiction-wise, what am I reading right now? Well, I'm actually about 20% of the way through the book Dune. I'm actually enjoying Dune very much. However, I am not reading this one in hardcover. I am reading this book via audiobook. Now, I know there are some bookies out there that will probably say, you know, it doesn't really count unless you're reading it hard copy, and I totally understand. However, my time is very, very, very precious to me, and I've found that fiction is one of those types of books, one of those types of categories where if I'm on a long drive because of work and I'm driving between construction projects, I actually utilize that hour-long drive to a job site by listening to fiction, because I find that I can follow fiction a lot better while I'm driving than I could a self-improvement book, for example, or a finance book where maybe there's figures with numbers and all kinds of stuff like that that I'm trying to digest and I need to actually see visually. So I'm listening to Dune right now. I am really enjoying the first 20% of the book that I've gotten into so far, and I'm really excited to get further into this one. As I understand it so far, that there's a movie eventually coming out on this book, so I'm looking to finish that one here probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I actually tend to read more than one book at a time, so I usually hop between books depending on, like I said, if I'm driving to a job site, then I'll listen to Dune. If I'm at home and I have some time to read, I'll probably pick from one of my other categories. So what is a recommendation that I have in fiction? Well, if you have never read the Kingkiller Chronicles, that is by far, I've read quite a bit of fiction, and the Kingkiller Chronicles is by far my favorite. I've probably read the 2 books that currently make up the Chronicles 3 times each, and I am still awaiting the 3rd book, like everybody else out there who has discovered this series. It probably will not come out for another decade or 2, I'm guessing. The author likes to take his time between books. There was quite some years between the publishing of the 1st book and the 2nd book, and There are always little rumor mills around when the third book is coming out, but for the most part, we still haven't seen anything. It's already been numerous years, and will probably be numerous more years before the third one comes out. But if you want to check that out, by all means, that book is absolutely amazing. I would describe it as Harry Potter more adult-esque, where if you could describe a world scientifically, almost like you're trying to explain how a Harry Potter spell works, but in a realistic manner with how it relates to physics and how the thermodynamic properties of something allow something to actually levitate or move, midair or something like that. This book is that book, with a ton of adventure, of course. And it's really unique because, in my opinion, it's not the typical book where you have the protagonist that prevails against all odds and just happens to be incredibly strong just because they are, and they were born that way and they're the one in a million. Instead, it follows a witty type of protagonist who is pretty intelligent, however, seems to luck out in a lot of different scenarios. And this legend starts building around the protagonist that resembles that you would typically see in any other kind of adventure book with the overly strong protagonist. That lore starts building around this protagonist, but because you're following the protagonist themselves in this book and not the lore around them, you realize that there are circumstances that are causing this protagonist to be incredibly lucky. And it kind of adds a little bit of realism to this sci-fi world and the relationships between the protagonist and everybody else in the book. And I've really, really enjoyed that. So that's my fiction category. The next category I want to get into is social. So I love reading anything that has to do with relationships. And the reason I love making sure I never forget to touch on this subject is because at the end of the day, we are social creatures. We want to interact with people. Some of us may be a little more introverted than others. I definitely would probably say I am a bit introverted. I know it doesn't appear that way to some, but I actually thoroughly enjoy my alone time and just kind of getting off away into my own little hobbies and little things. And I tend to shy away from the very, very large crowds and whatnot, but I don't do so badly in those situations that may benefit somebody that's a little more extroverted than I. And I think I owe a lot of that to because I've read so much, and I've always kind of tried to approach those scenarios from a, try this out and see how it works, or try this out and see how it works approach from reading books and then just trying them out in the real world and seeing how people react to different things. And one of the books, I actually have a hard copy here that I would recommend to anybody who is looking for something to benefit them in an interpersonal type of way. I would actually recommend The 5 Keys to Mindful Communication. So this book goes into communication not only with other people, but communication with yourself. So being present, that's the first key. It also goes into mindful listening, mindful speech, mindful relationships, and mindful responses. So it goes into those 5 keys quite a bit. I've really enjoyed this book. I read this a long time ago. A lot of the things in this book have actually stuck with me over time. And it kind of always reminds me that deep listening is very, very important. Making sure that you're not always trying to solve everybody's problem, which I tend to fall into that trap because I'm a construction person / engineer by trade, and I naturally want to solve everything as opposed to just slow down and listen. And I've found that being able to cultivate that has helped me a lot through life and through my career as well. Now, that is my recommendation, but what I am looking to read, once I get to that point in my list of books, I tend to prioritize the books that I'm reading. What I want to read, I'm actually divided between 2, and I'm not sure which one is going to be my next one, but I'll just point out both for right now. It's actually The War for Kindness and The Empathy Edge. Now, I'm leaning towards the empathy edge because the empathy edge is actually about how empathy can help you in your career and in business. More or less, never forgetting to be charitable when possible in business. Understanding that business doesn't have to be cutthroat, that you can prosper and so can everybody else that your business may be competing with, if you find synergistic relationships between said competition, right? So just trying to always keep that avenue open, trying to be more empathetic towards everybody. And so I'm leaning towards that one. The War for Kindness would be more personal than a business type of pick. So I'm not really sure which one I'm going to go with just yet, but those two are definitely on my list from a social category. The third category I want to go into is entrepreneurial. So I don't have that book in hard copy. I'm actually reading it on my phone, my Kindle app. And right now I'm about 30% of the way through of the book called Disciplined Entrepreneurialism. Now, this book I wouldn't recommend unless you are looking to start your own business and are very serious into becoming an entrepreneur. I am currently focusing on developing a flipping and wholesaling business. So I've had one successful flip thus far. I have a partner who I rely on heavily. He's been amazing. I love working with my partner. He has been a great mentor as well. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like I've lucked out quite a bit by making this networking relationship with my partner, and we're great friends, and I really appreciate everything he has been teaching me, and I'm hoping to catapult this relationship even further to develop a full-on business with him where we can do more flips, and we can, instead of buying houses to flip from other wholesalers, get into the wholesaling process ourselves, keep the best deals, and then wholesale the deals that are still good deals but not necessarily the best ones, right? And so that is something that, as we get into it, I'll probably make some videos on in the future, months down the road, as I gain experience in that area. But right now, kind of priming myself up for the entrepreneurial sector, I am reading Disciplined Entrepreneurialism, and it's very, very action oriented. So if you like books that give you steps and you're looking to develop a business, I would definitely recommend this book. It's been pretty good so far. I am only 30% of the way through, and I'm going through it, but I have enjoyed it thus far. It's definitely one of those where it's not overly vague, it's not overly broad. It really gives you step by step by step on how to do things and how to break everything down and develop a plan. So it's definitely getting a thumbs up from me. Now, another category that I want to get into is self-improvement. Now, self-improvement is something that I need to throw a disclaimer on because there are tons of self-help channels on YouTube, tons of self-help books, and it's something that needs to be said where self-help, self-improvement needs a bit of caution when approaching it. It is very easy to read self-improvement and go from one self-improvement book to the next self-improvement book to 100 hours of self-improvement YouTube videos to another self-improvement book to a self-improvement program that costs hundreds of dollars. Don't do that. Don't fall into that trap. I have some videos on my YouTube channel, not very many, but some that go into some self-improvement topics. I really enjoy self-improvement. However, you always, always, always have to remember to take action. You can't just read about making yourself better. You have to make yourself better. Now, I know this probably sounds obvious, but it's something that a lot of people get into, and they end up spending a ton of time into learning about self-help, but never actually practicing it and putting it into application. And so that is just my disclaimer before I get into self-help, self-improvement, is if you do buy any of these books or want to get into any of the topics that these books cover, just apply it to your life. Make sure that you're not waiting till the book is over to apply it to your life. As you read it, chapter by chapter, think about it, meditate on it, just ponder, how can I apply what I just learned in that chapter to my life? So with that said, self-help, one of the first books I ever actually read in self-improvement is actually The Power of Habit. Now, this is a very popular one. The Power of Habit, I highly recommend. It's a great book. It gives you the history on the more or less the study of habits, really kind of like the medical. I remember there were a bunch of examples of some medical breakthroughs where they were able to find where habit is kind of lodged in the brain and how your brain forms the ability to make habits. And there's a bunch of different things along, how you have a cue, a routine, and I'm probably citing that incorrectly, but I remember there was 3 different things, and you kind of have to learn how to set up your cue for creating a habit in order to change a bad habit into a good one. It was something that at the time when I read it was very, very impactful to me. It allowed me to set up a lot of positive habits. I was actually stretching, I think, like every other day. I started running. I still run every week. Back then I was going to the gym a lot. Then the pandemic hit. I stopped going to the gym, but I still do my own little home workouts. But it definitely helped me overall in life with just being a healthier, happier person, because I had these habits that were pushing me into being a more productive, efficient version of myself. And it's a book that if you haven't read, I highly recommend that. If self-improvement, self-help is something that you enjoy. Another one that I'm not so sure it falls in the self-help category, but I'm just going to put it there. It's more, I could almost create a 7th category of philosophy, but to me, it's probably the most impactful book to me that's affected me personally out of every category that I can possibly cover in this video. And it's the book called The Practicing Stoic. Now, big warning here. If you don't know anything about Stoicism, it is not simple. It is not simple, and it is not captivating. It is not entertaining. It is bland and it is boring, and it is hard to implement in life. But if you take it seriously, it is something that can radically change your life. I have read this book 3 different times now, and I read it over and over and over as I cycle through these categories, because Stoicism is something that takes constant practice. It never ends. If you want to be more stoic, like a stoic, and I know you may not know what that means because maybe you've never heard of Stoicism. A brief primer for anybody out there who doesn't know anything about Stoicism, I would say, is it helps you to approach the world in a way that may not be the natural way that you would approach the world. It actually helps you control your judgments. That would be probably the very, very, very surface tip of the iceberg way I could mention anything about Stoicism. It's a method for protecting what I would call your serenity, right? If you imagine you have a peaceful inner little orb in your body, and if somebody comes and cuts you off on the road and all you want to do is cuss them out, you're allowing that person to affect your inner orb of serenity, right? Stoicism trains you to protect that serenity and not allow those external factors to affect you and what is most important to you. It allows you to learn how to control your judgments of such a situation. So Stoicism is something that is very, very, very central to who I am. I've made actually a video on Stoicism called Negative Visualization. If you're interested in that, you can click up here. But if you've never heard of Stoicism, I would probably recommend checking out the YouTube channel, The Daily Stoic with Ryan Holiday. He actually has his own book. He is definitely a great intro into Stoicism. If you already know about Stoicism and you're looking for an amazing manual on Stoicism, I would highly recommend this book. I would not recommend it for someone who's never heard about Stoicism, just trying to get into it, because this book is bland and boring. It cites a million different quotes from the ancient Greeks and Romans. But if it's something that interests you, you've been into it a little bit, and now you're looking to get into it further, then I would highly recommend it, as long as you know what you're getting into. So aside from that, that kind of wraps up the self-improvement section category of the books I am reading, have read. The next category I want to get into is real estate. So if you've seen any of my real estate videos, I am an active real estate investor. I love real estate. I love real estate because it's a way for me to create passive income. And to me, passive income is an avenue for eventually gaining back time, right? You have to be able to purchase back time. I absolutely despise the fact that I have a third of my life spoken for with sleep, another third or more of my life spoken for with a daytime job, and then another portion of that remaining third spoken for with just random obligations, and that you only get to use, maybe a sixth of your day every day for whatever it is that you want. I want to increase that sixth of my day to as large of a portion of the pie as I possibly can, to where I can do whatever it is that I want with my family, my hobbies, all that kind of stuff, right? And real estate is how I intend to do that. Now, I definitely love the stock market. I definitely love investing in the stock market and growing returns. However, the stock market is where I put money until I find a good real estate deal. So I like having my money grow in the stock market, and then as soon as I find a great real estate deal to get into, I move the money into that deal. Whatever's left over, I keep in the stock market, and then I make my wonderful returns in real estate. And then once I cash out of that, it goes right back in the stock market, and that's kind of how I balance the two. So on real estate, I have some books here that I've read hard copy that I believe are great foundations to anybody wanting to learn about real estate. The base book that maybe a lot of you out there that have already expressed an interest in real estate have possibly heard of or read already is The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. This is a great book to set up your foundational knowledge in real estate. Another few books that I have on real estate that are a little more niche would be house hacking. So house hacking is when you basically live in your home and you can rent out a part of it, or kind of create like maybe let's say an Airbnb out of a mother-in-law suite, so that you are generating income in the home that you're living in. It allows you to afford more home, or to actually just be able to save up a lot more, since you're able to reduce your rent or mortgage payments. So this is one that goes into that in depth. I really enjoyed that book. Specifically, Ben Leibovich in this book actually goes into how he was able to buy more home by getting a very, very nice home above his means. And it had a very, very nice mother-in-law suite that they were able to Airbnb and bring the cost down to what he was spending on a normal 3-2 home in the suburbs. So that was his way of kind of upscaling his life. So you don't always necessarily need to be crazy frugal when it comes to real estate. It can allow you to actually increase your means and your living style, your lifestyle, if you will, through niche methods. Another one is real estate note investing. This one, I don't imagine many of you will want to read, but it was one that I found interesting for when I get later on in my real estate career, where maybe I might want something a little more, even more passive than rentals, for example, where you can actually invest in buying the mortgages on homes. So people are actually, when they're making their mortgage payment, it's going to you instead of the bank. So that was a really cool one on that. So that's it for real estate. I actually don't have something lined up for another real estate book right now. A lot of my experience in real estate is actually coming through experience. I'm actively looking for my next flip. But with that, I'm going to jump into my next and last category, and that is finance. Now, this first finance book, it's also one of those staples that a lot of you have probably read out there. It's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's kind of I would probably almost say it's a little more of a mindset book. But mindset is incredibly important, and it's mindset around finances. And mindset is something that you can't really get into these very large endeavors where you're trying to build businesses and do all these different things unless you're mentally prepared for it, and you mentally trained yourself to almost change who you are, to become the best version of yourself that you can be while you're undertaking all these things. To not procrastinate, to be as efficient as you can, and to keep everybody else's desires, wants, and needs almost ahead of your own unselfishly. So kind of developing into this best version of yourself. These mindset books are very valuable towards that end. So Think and Grow Rich was one that I enjoyed from a finance perspective, but like I said, it was more mindset related. The book I am actually looking to get into next on mindset is actually All the Money in the World by Laura Vanderkam. So that book goes deep into frugality. And when I say frugal, I don't mean cheap. I don't mean spending as little as you possibly can on something, but spending your money as wisely as you can on something. So frugality being, instead of buying a $500 car on Craigslist and then you have to put $1,000 repair into it 2 months later, buying a used vehicle that has been maintained well for $3,000 and getting years out of that vehicle with minimal maintenance, right? So frugality is something that I want to apply better to my life. I feel like we do somewhat of a decent job at it in our household. However, I will never say that I do anything perfectly, because I definitely don't. But in an effort to try to get better at that, that's actually the one I want to look into next on finance. And with that, guys, that is all the books that I am recommending / looking into getting to. I rotate these pretty regularly. So just real quick to recap, I am currently reading Dune for fiction, currently reading Disciplined Entrepreneurialism for my entrepreneurial category. And next I'm gonna get into my social category and read one of those 2 books that I mentioned before on empathy. And then after that, I will probably be getting into the finance book, All the Money in the World. And then probably rotating again once I finish all those books. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys have ever read any of these books that I'm thinking about reading, if you've ever read any of the books that I'm recommending. Let me know if you have anything on your list. I would love to hear what you guys have out there, because I would love to add to my list. And I love reading. I want to read as much as I possibly can. I feel like, people live their entire lives and spend decades learning as much as they can about this topic that they write a book on. And you're able to almost save time by spending time on reading a book, because you take this person's knowledge, condense it into this, this nugget here, and are able to extract all of that in a matter of hours and apply it to yourself. So I love reading. Let me know if you guys share a love of reading as well. And again, what you guys are reading, I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you haven't liked the video, please do. I love hearing from you guys. So until the next one, guys, see ya.